Let's go.
Hello FPL managers, yes, we are back with another video. You see the thumbnail, it says how I make the perfect game week 1 drafts. Every season when the player prices drops, there's always this crying on the timeline, especially if you're plugged into FPL Twitter. Everybody's always screaming, this player is so expensive, Kevin De Bruyne is so expensive, Salah is so expensive. Well, yeah, they're always going to be expensive, and you're always going to survive it by having a set strategy on how you maneuver, how you build your first team, your game week 1 drafts. It's very essential that you have a strategy on how you go about this, because it's going to set you up for how your season is going to go. You don't want to start the season chasing your middle league opponents. You want to be ahead of the curve as soon as the game week 1 points roll in, and it's usually best to plan ahead over the first 3 game weeks. The plan isn't to get 100 points in game week 1 and then end up with 20 in game week 2. It's best you just get 70 in game week 1, another 70 or 60 in game week 2, probably another 70 in game week 3. You know, really average scores, but when they pile up, when you gather them up, they are very respectable, and it will have you comfortably in that top 1 million. So we're going to be building a 15-man squad, and before we do all that, there's some things we need to note. And for this season, there's gonna be players who are at the Euros and players who are at the Copa America, and these players, it depends on how deep into the competition they go in and if their managers are going to have them rested for the start of the season. We're going to have to keep an eye on the preseason, the squads, the players who are going to be picked. Usually give an indication on how the managers are thinking. Last season we didn't have a preseason, if you recall, because of the entire COVID-19 debacle, but this season there's gonna be preseason, so it gives us a chance to have a feel of what our EPL managers are thinking about their players, the players they bring in, the players who have been there last season, and it gives us an idea of how to, select the best assets who are going to work for us for game week 1, and probably moving on from that. Okay, and also it will be best to note that there are going to be Olympics, and some certain players have been called up by their national teams, and these players might not start the season, so you might want to have that in mind. So we are building a 15-man team. It's just a rough draft. It's just to give you an idea of how to go about getting your teams set up, and with these things in mind, you might have to carry them into when you set up your own teams, and you might have to keep an eye on the news, on rumors and all that, so you can have a perfect 15-man squad when the season begins. Okay, and also you might want to follow these a strategy which I follow. I try to make sure that I don't bring in any newly transferred players, players moving from one club to the other. I try not to bring them in for my game week 1, because it's always tricky trying to determine if they're gonna start the first game or if they're gonna get subbed in in the second half. And I also try not to bring in any newly promoted players, and that's because they're new to the league. There's no way to know how they're gonna react, and they might just be like a deer in the headlights and completely freeze up, and you don't want that. Even though they're really good in the championship, there's no telling how good they're gonna be in the big boy league. Okay, so I try not to bring in too many promoted players. If I'm going to bring in anyone, probably just one, and he's probably not even going to be in the starting 11. He's going to be on the bench, or probably like a placeholder or something. And also, you might want to decide really quickly what your first wildcard strategy is going to be. Now, if you're going to be having a very early wildcard, it will give you an idea of how you're going to what players you're going to bring in, how expensive they're going to be, and what your bench is going to look like, which is very important. If you're going to have a wild card, your first wild card played deep into the season, probably a game week 10 or a game week 16, just before the second wild card comes in, then you might probably build your team differently. I'm going to explain that as the video goes on, but you might want to have all this in mind, and remember to apply this when you're building up your 15-man squad. Okay, so we're going to go stepwise with this, and I'll try not to talk about each and every player I select. I'm just going to go by the positions. So we're going with the goalies first, the defense, the midfield, and then the forwards. Okay, so we're starting with the goalies, and the first rule I follow when building my drafts, my first draft, is to not spend more than 10 million pounds on goalkeepers. Okay, some people would go with the really expensive goalkeeper, you know, a top 6 goalkeeper, probably a Mendy or an Edison or an Allison. They cost about 6 million pounds, and then they would probably go with a goalkeeper who doesn't feature, or a really cheap goalkeeper. Probably from what I can see, a lot of people might go with Foster from Watford, who just got newly promoted. So you'd have a 6 million pound goalkeeper who's going to start, and a 4 million pound goalkeeper on the bench. Totals up to 10 million. It's good enough. I usually would want to go for spending less than 10 million on my goalkeepers, so I preferably would go with 2 4.5 million goalkeepers. But if I am going to do something different, then probably a 5 million pound goalkeeper. I would go with a goalkeeper who's used to making a lot of saves, not one who is guaranteed of clean sheets, because if you want clean sheets, you can go with the top 6 goalkeepers, but that would require you spending more money than you would want to if you intend building a very strong game week 1 draft. Okay, now I'm not saying that getting in Mendy is somehow wrong, or it doesn't guarantee you good points. All I'm saying is that if you want to build a very strong 15-man squad, going with a goalkeeper who costs 6 million might not be the way to go about it. But it depends on you. This is just my strategy, so this is what I do. If I were to go about it, if I were to spend less than 10 million, I would probably say go for a Martinez and then the Foster, but I wouldn't do that for this season, because I don't expect Martinez to be as good as he was last season. He could be, but I don't expect it. So I intend to spend even less than that. I intend to spend probably buy a Sanchez, who's got very good fixtures to start the season. He's got difficulty 2 fixtures for game week 1 and 2, so that would be okay for me. And probably go with a Guaita on the bench. So that's 2 4.5 million goalkeepers who don't total more than 9 million pounds. So that leaves me with 1 million pounds to spend on the rest of my squad. So as for goalkeepers, I'll go with this. And as for my defense, I usually don't like to spend more than 25 million. I try to aim for lower than that. Some people might go with Trent Alexander-Arnold, and then for the rest of your defense, they would have a 4.5 million pound defenders. Probably one of them will be a 4.0 pound midfielder. He'll be a placeholder. So that would also work. But I personally prefer to spread the funds across the entire team for, you know, my starting drafts. So you could go either way. It depends on you and how you feel, but usually this is how I go about it. I would start with probably, let's see, this is how my defense would look. And the reason I'm going with Reguilon is because his starting fixtures are quite good. If you can maneuver the game week 1 fixture where he faces Manchester City, then you're good, because he has Wolves and then Watford and then Crystal Palace after that. So it gives you some time to, you know, set the rest of your team up depending on how the rest of the game weeks go. So Reguilon, Fofana, Holgate, Lowton and Tierney. So that totaled up to 23.5 million pounds. So that leaves me with enough funds to you know, invest on the rest of my squad. So as you can tell, I'm not banking too much on my defenders. I just, you know, get decent players for the start of the season and work from there, because I don't trust clean sheets at the start of the season as much as most people would. Okay, it's best to get in decent players and then find out what teams are very good, because as good as, say, a Trent can look like, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to have good it doesn't mean Liverpool are going to have good defensive stats. Okay, like last season showed, just one injury to one of their defenders and the entire system comes crumbling down. So you can't really trust the defense as much during the beginning of the season as much as you would like to think. So I prefer to spread my funds around, and then over the course of the start of the season, pinpoint what teams are having great defense, and then invest in those. Okay, so this is how my defense is gonna look for if I was to set up a draft for game week 1. So let's see how the midfield looks. So usually in midfield, we like to avoid defensive midfielders because they really don't contribute to getting a lot of FPL points. The most they can do is get you a clean sheet on average, which only yields 1 extra point aside their appearance points. So they will get you at most on average 3 points, and you really need more than that from your assets. At least you need a higher ceiling for these midfielders. So usually avoid defensive midfielders unless you can help it, and more than likely it's going to be as a side player, a bench player. So avoid defensive midfielders if you can help it, and when selecting midfielders, try and pinpoint and target players who take a lot of set pieces, players who take corners, players who take free kicks, and if you're lucky, you could get a midfield player who takes penalties, and that would be really nice. And spend as much as you can afford in your midfield. Okay, this is where most of your points are gonna be gotten from. On average, most of your points come from your midfield. Okay, because you have more players who are able to attack and give assists and score goals on their own. So you have a lot of wingers who are labeled as midfielders, and a lot of forwards who are labeled as midfielders. So you can capitalize on that and spend the bulk of your money should be spent here. Okay, so this is how I've selected them. Fernandes, Maddison, who's quite cheap. He's 7.0 million, and he takes a lot of set pieces for Leicester City, except I'm mistaken, he takes a lot of corners, a lot of free kicks. So at 7.0, he's a bargain. Rafinha is another player I would go for. It could have been Saka, but because of the set piece potential of Rafinha, I went with him. Havertz for 8.5 million is also looking good, and went for Douglas Luiz, who's 4.5 million. He's probably going to be a bench player. And that's how the midfield looks. I don't think this midfield is up to 40 million, about probably 36-37 million. Okay, so that's how the midfield would look. Fernandes can easily become Salah. He can be Kevin De Bruyne. This is just a rough draft. This is not definitely what I'm gonna go for, but this can be Fernandes could be he could be KDB, he could be Sterling, Maddison could go up, could be Son. So it could be any of these players, okay? But I'm going with this strategy of targeting players who take a lot of set pieces. Fernandes is on penalties, Maddison is on free kicks, Rafinha is on corners, stuff like that. In fact, in your defense, you can find such players like, for instance, Trent or Robertson. You could go for cheaper, like Cresswell, who's 5.5. So we could take one of these 5.0 midfielders and upgrade them to a Cresswell, and then downgrade one of the 4.5 million midfielders, and we achieve that. So getting players who take a lot of set pieces for their teams can be very helpful. Okay, so this is how average midfield should look, and our attack should look something like this. We always like to go with 3 starting forwards. The reason being, one of the midfielders might not feature for your team, and you would want a player that can easily just come in, in attack. And I usually like to place my third striker as my first sub, because they're closer to goal, so there's always a chance that they can score. And I've gone with Aubameyang, reason because he's on penalties and he could easily be Kane. And Kane has, like I said, for Regulon, he has very good fixtures, that start the season. But that'll be if he's still a Spurs player by the time the season rolls in. He's got Wolves, Watford and Crystal Palace to start the season after the Man City game. If he moves to Man City, it'll be interesting to see him face his old team Spurs in game week 1, and I'm thinking probably Spurs would not want that, so they would hold on to him until after that game. So if he's going to move at all, that is how I think it's gonna go. But I've gone with Aubameyang, Kelechi instead of Vardy, but it could easily be Vardy. It all depends on how well they do in preseason. This can all change, of course, and probably a Saint Maximin who's listed as a forward this season, which is interesting. I don't know if that makes him a better FPL asset because he was a midfielder last season, and for each goal he scored, he had 5 points, but as a forward, that reduces to 4. So does that make him better? I think that makes him worse, but you guys let me know. But I've gone with Tony. Tony's on penalties for Brentford, and they were really good in the championship last season. I could have gone with Pookie, who's 6.0, but either way, it all depends on how the preseason goes, how the first games go. He will probably not start in my first 11, so this is just a rough draft. And if I was to go with anyone, it would be Tony because he's on penalties, and probably Aubameyang for the same reason. And probably the reason I wouldn't go with Kane is because of the whole transfer. Stuff might be on his head. He might be distracted. In fact, you can see from the Euros that he's not exactly 100%. So we don't know exactly why that is. So I would avoid Kane, probably a Vardy, probably an Aubameyang, and go with those players. So that will be my 15-man squad. Aubameyang, he's got Chelsea in game week 2 and Manchester City in game week 3, so that's kind of a difficult start after the Brentford game in game week 1. But game week 4 he's got Norwich, and game week 5 he's got Burnley, and that's reasonable enough. He can start, and then you can switch him to probably a Vardy or probably a Kane, and then switch back to Aubameyang for this fixture. So it all depends, and this is probably what I would be going with if I were to set up a game week 1 draft. So as you can see, it's not really that difficult setting up the draft, and the kicker for this 15-man squad is that it costs a total of 95 million. Okay, it's not expensive. It's you actually have 5 million to upgrade this team. So Maddison can easily become Kevin De Bruyne. So you would have 3 premium players in your squad, and if you go with the Trent Alexander-Arnold or the Cresswell option I gave in the beginning, you could have up to 4 premium players, at least 1 in defense, 2 in midfield, and 1 in attack. So it's not that crazy to really think about it. This 15-man squad costs 95 million, and you can easily upgrade any one of these players to any player of your choice with the funds in the bank. Okay, I just did this to show you how easy it is to get a strong team without getting confused about how you're going to go about it. So this is it. This is how roughly we go about setting up our drafts. Of course, you're going to remember that there are Euros going on, the Copa America. You're going to have to keep your eye on the preseason. It's very important to give you an idea of what players are in the manager's minds, and the Olympics, the players who are going to be called up, and also try and have your wildcard strategy already decided before you set up your game week 1 draft. Okay, to help you know exactly what you're doing and not get caught off guard by anything that happens in the beginning stages of the season. Okay, hope this was helpful to you. Our actual game week 1 draft is going to drop closer to when the season is gonna begin. Also, our prediction league video is going to drop very soon after this. It's just gonna explain what our side challenge for this season is going to be. Last season we did the mid-range madness. This season is going to be something like a prediction league. It will be explained in the next video. Okay, and I think that'll be all. You guys keep enjoying the Euros, and yeah, catch you in the next one.